Hey, Brett, you're muted. So,
My name is Sam Fahnestock. I am a principal engineer and our lead security engineer here at SDS. And we are going to dive into ATAK just a little bit here. We've been talking a lot about BATDOK. ATAK is kind of parent, cousin, weird relation to BATDOK. But we're going to talk about why we care about this in the medical world here in a little bit as well. As Brett mentioned, I've been with SDS for a while now, about 9 years. Prior to SDS, I worked with the Air Force for about 10 years as both contractor and civilian down in San Antonio doing cyber defense work, hence why lead security engineer for SDS as well. So this afternoon, we are going to dive into what is ATAK. So kind of give a little bit of a clarification of, we've been talking a lot about BATDOK. What is the difference? What is ATAK? What is it for? We're going to talk about why we should care about it for medical, and then dive into a little bit of how we integrate what we want to do medically into ATAK. Some unique challenges, as Byron mentioned earlier, unique challenges in integrating with BATDOK. They're very similar, and some additional unique challenges in integrating with ATAK. And then finally, how do we get started? We have some medical device, some idea, prototype. How do we start getting it into ATAK? That's where we'll end the session today. So what is ATAK? ATAK stands for Android Tactical Assault Kit. I'll use my cheat sheet here as well. It is basically a situational awareness tool. It was developed by the Army many years ago, and it was designed to be pluggable. It was meant to be used by combat forces, but also it was meant to be expandable to use cases outside of a military combat situation. Hence, it is now in use by many other groups. We've got law enforcement, we've got first responders, even commercial and recreation. You can go on to the Google Play Store and you will see that there are ATAK plugins for hunting and game cams and stuff like that. So it has expanded far beyond its original use case. It's many years old at this point as well. But ATAK is not a single device. It was the original. It was the first iteration, but they have now built a product suite of what they call TAK devices. We're going to go through a little bit here, and then on the next slide, we'll see how do these things work together. What's the point of having all these things? So we see ATAK there, kind of top middle. That's runs on Android. It does all of our situational awareness, much like we saw with BATDOK, but in the broader sense that we'll talk through here shortly. TAK server, it's what's going to tie all of these things together. It's the centralized server. Typically, it's sitting back at like a headquarters, something like that. WinTAK does very similar to what ATAK does, but obviously, as you could probably guess, it runs on a Windows machine. So it's designed for more of the situational awareness, less of the mobile capabilities. You're probably not carrying your laptop around on the battlefield. TAK-X it's an alpha right now, so they are in development. It is run on Python, and the goal of it is to be cross-platform, so it can run on many different types of devices. WebTAK is in a similar vein, is designed to run on your web browser, so then again, it can run on many different types of devices. WebTAK and TAK-X don't have quite the same capabilities because when you are developing something for Android, for example, you have access to a lot of hardware that is a lot harder to get to when you're running on a web browser or something like Python. So those two are a little less feature filled when it comes to the hardware integration of the device. VTAC, we had a really cool presentation earlier about the use of virtual reality in training. They are doing very similar things, virtual reality, with the TAC suite here. As you can see, if you can see in that little picture down there, they've got a 3D model of the battlefield. And so you can use your virtual reality to more effectively and more easily see around, like, you know, we've seen in sci-fi movies for the last 20 years. TAC Watch is also in alpha. It is in development. It's meant to give you minimal situational awareness on a watch. So you don't want to deploy everyone with a phone, or perhaps it's harder to fit it on their person. You could put these things on a watch and get messages or smaller pieces of information. And finally, ATAK, it's in beta. It's, as obviously, it is the iPhone version, and it is meant to mimic all of the ATAK capabilities. Not there yet, but that's the goal, and they're on their way to getting it. So why do we have a whole suite of things? Well, it's to provide situational awareness in many areas across the battlefield, regardless of what capabilities or what systems each combatant has. As you can see on the screen here, all of these devices communicate back with TAC servers. So the idea is your platoon sergeants or your squadron leaders, they are out on the battlefield. They all have their own version. Maybe some have an ATAK, some have an ITAK, whatever it might be. The commander back at headquarters now has this access to a TAC server and can see the situational awareness of everything that is going on across a whole theater of operations, as opposed to something limited to, you know, a small town or something that's going on. This will become very important when we begin talking about the benefits of ATAK in the medical devices field. So finally, one of the benefits of this being an older yet maintained product is they have released an open source public version of this. They call it ATAK Civ. It's also known as CivTAC. This is a version that anyone here can download on the Google Play Store. You can develop plugins for it. It is not as feature full as the military version. You'll notice the public open source version there. What that is for someone to develop a plugin for it, they can go there. It's not as maintained as the military version. So I believe the latest public open source version is 4.10, and military wise, they are building 5.3 right now. So it's a little behind, right? Yeah, please. I believe that is the route they're going. I don't know if they're also intending on taking down CivTAC as well. As of right now, it's still available. Well, I haven't checked today. As of creating this slideshow, it was still available. But I don't know the path forward for that. It is a benefit, though, of having the system that has been around for so long, is everything you develop, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, everything you develop on CivTAC can be run with no modification on the same version of the ATAK mill. It does not go backwards. Anything developed on a mill usually requires a little bit of modification to run it on the Civ. So a little bit of features that are built into ATAK. Blue Force tracking, that's just tracking of your friendly forces, route planning and navigation, direct messaging, geofencing, all of these things that you would expect out of a situational awareness tool. Don't worry, I know none of these sound very interesting for medical, but they will here shortly. What's most important for us is that it is pluggable. And it is pluggable more so than BATDOK. BATDOK is meant to add new sensors ATAK is built that you can literally write your own application that sits on top of ATAK and do almost anything you want. And we'll see some examples of that here shortly. If you are interested in learning more about ATAK, they do have a public landing page, ATAK.gov. You can get to it without a CAC or anything. And so they have a lot of information about the different suites that they have, the different use cases, and things like this. So as an example of what ATAK can do, this is an application that SDS built in conjunction with a company called Accelitas. This was an attachment to a weapons scope, which took some of the light off so that it could send video over to ATAK. And it allowed somebody looking at a tablet or phone to see exactly what the shooter was seeing. And I showed this because it allows us to see the plug-in capabilities of ATAK. And I actually have a video a little bit later that's going to dive into this even more deeply when we talk about integration. But what you'll notice is you have control over whatever portion of the screen your plugin is running on. And it allows you to do more. One of the things we talked about, a limitation of BATDOK, is you have no control over the UI. So if you are developing a brand new sensor, which BATDOK doesn't understand how to visualize, you're at the mercy of working with the BATDOK group, which they are a great group by all means, but you're at the mercy of the time that they have, and they have their own priorities. And so getting your sensor visualization integrated into BATDOK is not as simple. On ATAK, you have totality of control over how you visualize that. We have wireless video here. If you have specific charts or graphics or overlays, things you want to show, all of that can go into ATAK as a plug. So why do we care about this for medical? Well, obviously situational awareness is important. We want to know where our casualties are if we're in the middle of a battlefield situation. But beyond that, it allows us to communicate and see the casualties in a broader sense. Again, we see the benefits of BATDOK being able to know which of my patients that are right in front of me are in the most dire need of assistance. This can allow us to see that across a battlefield. Perhaps we have 4 different casualties going on across this little compound here, and we know the one coming in from the northeast corner is in the most dire need because all of that information has been transmitted back up to TAC server. Therefore, I, as perhaps the combat medic in the central command, can see that and can direct and help order things. Another benefit of this is moving out to public and private sectors and other government sectors beyond just the military, as I mentioned earlier. So this can be useful for first responders, for the police. In fact, there are SWAT teams around the country who use this as well, not necessarily for a medical application, but they're using the situational awareness tool as they're going into hostage negotiations, things along those lines. And again, finally, we have full control over the display, and we'll get to see that here shortly. So, Brett, if you're able to hit play on that video. So this is the video. This is the one of the ATAK plugins we have built. And again, this isn't a medical plugin, but I show this video hopefully in the hopes to see some of the things you can do with ATAK. And so one of the options you'll see right now on the screen, our plugin is only taking up about 1/3 of the screen. You can have your plugin take 1/3, 1/2, or even the full screen. Is it not working, Brett? Oh, no, go ahead. Yeah. There's no sound to it. Sorry, I'm just going to talk through it. So you'll see here shortly, you can do things like show pop-ups that you can do on any application. You can interact with the map. This particular plugin doesn't do that, hence just the random view of the globe. But you can also add custom icons and actions, and you can create programmatic interactions with the map as you use things. And so as far as the capabilities, it basically allows you to do anything you can on a standalone application inside of this structure. And as Byron mentioned earlier with BATDOK, this is a user experience which people are used to using. So instead of having them switch between applications, instead of having them needing to learn a new UI, they're already working in something they are familiar with. Now, a couple requirements for integrating with ATAK, and you have to follow the ATAK theme. Now, I say have to. Technically, you don't, but it is very strongly encouraged by the ATAK development team. And basically what that means, you'll notice it's kind of a gray, black, white theme there. They encourage you to use their specific color schemes, their fonts, their sizes, things along those lines. It's not too terribly restrictive, but if you're trying to make something flashy, probably not going to fit inside of it. The other requirement for plugins is you have to use their specific development environment. We say the ATAK Gradle and Java versions. So if you are building this for a specific version of ATAK, you have to use that version's Java and Gradle. Now, this is not usually a detriment, but occasionally it can cause issues if you're trying to use, say, a third-party library, or you're trying to use, some brand new fancy Android feature that's come out 2 months ago. Likely not going to be available yet. Oh, I guess hitting that started to reload. So let's dive into a little bit now of the ATAK integration. I'll try to keep this as appropriate as possible without diving too deeply into the tech that Byron and I would love to dive into. This uses your standard Android development environment. It's going to use Android Studio, it's going to use Java, and then it can use either a physical device or what's called an AVD, an Android virtual device, so an emulated device. Now, one limitation with all Android development, and particularly here with ATAK, is if you are trying to use a virtual device, an emulated device, there are certain aspects you cannot do. So, for example, the plugin we just showed used Bluetooth to connect to the device, and it used Wi-Fi to stream that video. Those capabilities are not available on the emulated device. Therefore, we had to use physical devices during development. Same thing with BATDOK development. You're going to want to use a physical device because most of your sensors are going to be connecting over some sort of wireless communications, which is usually not available. This is a very high-level picture of the ATAK structure. This basically says that we can interact with any piece of ATAK we want through a very specific structure ATAK has built for us. The long story short is most of your plugins interactives are going to be in what they call a drop-down receiver. That's where your plugin is working and running and doing its stuff. These map components are ways you communicate with what we saw on the map. If you want to make an icon have a piece on the map have a custom icon, that's how you're going to interact. If you want an icon to flash, or you want to place your own target or cursor, anything like that, it happens through map components. And then when you want to send communication back to TAK server, or you want to send up a push notification onto the phone, that's where this tool comes into play. It fires off events for other pieces of ATAK or other pieces of the phone. Some unique challenges with ATAK. Much like BATDOK, versioning is a challenge. And I would argue versioning with ATAK is even more of a challenge than BATDOK. Prior to ATAK 4.10, your plugin had to be built for the exact version that it was meant to run on, down to the third octet. So if you built an app for a plugin for 4.9.1, it would not run on 4.9.2. Now they've resolved that issue in 4.10. However, because this is so old and we know the speed of government and military, most places are still using either 4.3 or 4.7, which means most of the plugins you build are going to need to be purpose built for your target. And so when you are building, one nice thing you can do is you can build libraries, code libraries, which you then plug into architectures specifically compiled for the specific version. So it's not like you're writing two different copies of the same code, but it is a little bit more of a management piece to make sure that you are building it for the correct. We had program of record mentioned earlier. ATAK utilizes programs of record to say what is an official military ATAK plugin and what is not. And so this can be a challenge if you want to be on their quote unquote ATAK plugin store. To do that, you have to be under a program of record, which means you have to have special contract, et cetera, et cetera. However, if you are building this for for public consumption, again, we go back to the ATAK Civ, assuming it sticks around, you can build your plugin for ATAK Civ, and it can be publicly available in on the Play Store. Lastly, the access to the build systems and libraries. When you are building the code, when you are building your application, it calls out to a private server, which is owned by the ATAK team. If you do not have access to that, you cannot even build your code. So that is obviously a challenge if you're trying to build something that is not the Civ version. So for the time being, you can use Civ, but when that goes away, development of future ATAK plugins is going to be limited to people who have access to ATAK.gov. You get that through DoD, through the contract. So lastly, how to get started. So a couple ways. Obviously, we can try working on the ATAK Civ. As I mentioned earlier, any plugin built on ATAK Civ will work on ATAK Mil. If you have access to ATAK.gov, there are a lot of great resources. Wiki.tac.gov is their wiki, and they have a lot of information on there. They talk both about where ATAK itself is going, but they also have a lot of great information on how to set up your development environment, how to build this kind of thing, how to interact with the map in this way. They have a lot of different capabilities on there. And then git.tac.gov, you're only going to be able to get access to that if you are on a contract or in the DoD and able to get behind the TAC firewall. However, they have a lot of sample code there. They have a lot of different starter plugins there available. And for all of the programs of record, their source code lives on here as well. They're licensed, obviously not for consumption of others to take and modify. However, they do live there for building on particular ATAK versions if necessary. And then lastly, reach out to us for integrations. We've done a number of different ATAK integrations over the years, and we would love to help out. That is all I have for this afternoon, short and sweet. Anyone have any questions? Yeah. So the question was, is there any limit to what you can store on the server and how that get up there? That is all programmed by the plugins themselves. So none of the data of your plugin is automatically sent up to TAC server. You tell it to go to TAC server, and then you would also have a plugin you built for TAC server. At that point, it's going to be up to you. It's going to be up to your choice of, do we store this indefinitely? Does it have a life cycle of an hour, 5 days, whatever it might be? Or does it then get sent off somewhere else for archiving, data retrieval, and things? Does that answer your question? So the question was, since ATAK allows full customizability, could you build a BATDOK plugin that goes into ATAK? Well, yeah. So the difficulty with that would be both of those environments have their own user interface. Now, you could build a BATDOK plugin which communicates with the TAK suite. The TAK suite uses a standardized messaging system called COT, and off the top of my head, I can't remember what that stands for. But they use a standardized messaging server. So if you were in an environment which allows you to sit on the same wireless or wired network that TAK is communicating over, yes, you could theoretically build a BATDOK plugin which communicates back to the TAK. Yep. Mhm. So the question / comment was desiring to hear more about the potential leaving of CivTAC going away. So from what I know, CivTAC doesn't have a plan of going away, just the open source code. Now, I don't know. What I can say is a lot of the plugins we have built for CivTAC were actually built using the Miltac environment, the Miltac SDK, which has the ability to build for CivTAC. So a little spaghetti there, but I don't foresee CivTAC going away because of exactly what you said. There are so many people in the public sector, not just recreational, but also of other governmental areas which are using it. So.
And then one other comment was, there are a little bit of logic here that the plugin that we built for ATAK, we ended up building a standalone application eventually. We were deeply involved in it, so can you enlighten us on what was it about ATAK that didn't meet every need that the customer wanted, but they decided to go outside of ATAK specifically for this application?
Yeah. So the question was, when we built this particular plugin for ATAK, the customer decided it didn't meet their needs, and so therefore they asked us to build a standalone version of outside of ATAK, and the question was why. Really, it was because of the version. When we went to deliver it to them, they were unaware of the versioning concern. They had groups there. I don't know how much of that I can share, so I'll.
I have shared that there were, 810 groups.
Okay.
Developed by one. You can look up the contact.
Yeah.
Developed by the regular warfare.
Mm-hmm.
But then we draw in a lot of parts.
Yes.
So now, by the time we deliver, there were 8 or 10 groups.
Yes. So we had 8 or 10 different groups from different military branches all together. And as we went to deliver this, they had people using 4.3, 4.7. We had built the plugin for 4.9 as per the initial contract. And when they discovered that what we built wouldn't work for the rest of them, that was what caused the desire to go to a standalone application. That and getting an ATO for our plugin, because it was not a program of record. It was from a research group. And so therefore getting, ATO approval to operate, to get it through so that they could even put it on their ATACs, even if we did build it with the correct version. So at that point of that particular contract, the decision was, let's just go to standard level. Now, I would argue that at some point here in the next few years, because they resolved that in 4.10 and forward, that's probably going to be less of a. Any other questions? Thank you all very much.
Well, I just wanted to say something in closing real quick. I think Ed has a couple things he wants to mention, but my biggest thing is I wanted to thank the speakers for coming out today. I know this wasn't easy. Take time out of your schedule, come down and share with us, but I'm really grateful that you guys did. Who is still here? Okay. And just a personal thank you for that. I also wanted to thank Alex Vallo, who isn't here, but he's up there. Alex spent most of the day handling the remote participants, which there he is. Hi, Alex. He did a really great job helping me out, getting things tested, working out some of the troubles that we had earlier. But I'm grateful, Alex. Thank you so much. And that's it. I want to hand this over to Ed so he can give his final remarks. And I will look forward to speaking with you all, well, shortly and often.
Okay. I just wanted to say a few remarks in closing. SDS works in a lot of different arenas. We work in a lot of different domains. And I was saying to someone that by number of hours or number of dollars or however you want to count it, military medical is probably 10-15%. I'm looking at our PMO office to see about where we think we probably are, depending on the year. I mean, some years this might be half of what we do, but some years it's we work in industrial and transportation and aerospace and other military that isn't military medical. But this holds a special place for us because of the impact that it has on the men and women serving our country. So when we look at something that we can do, and we see it also with the people that we work with. I talk about the product that we built with ATAK. Byron has a close relationship with the BATDOK folks, and some of the sensors that we've integrated with BATDOK are in the case in the back there, and that's another instance. And we talk about these products that are developed by one group within the military and then used by others, or maybe they're developed with one thing in mind and then used by a lot of things. One of the great things about SDS is, even when we are working on, that's not good. Even when we're working on technology, nothing that we do requires a skip. Nothing that we do is classified at this point. I'm very happy with that, and I know our engineers are very happy with that. They don't have to work in a skiff, but it also means that they're public programs. We can talk about them, we can brag about them, we can show them, and they're very important to us because of that. And I want to talk a little bit, just very briefly, about this transition that happens as people get a hold of technology and they find new ways to use it. We showed the rifle scope product, which started out simply as a sniper training tool, and then suddenly, as they started showing it to other people, other folks within the military came up with a lot of different ideas of how to use this in more than just sniper training, close combat training, where you run through a simulated building, and you're working close combat. The fact that this could effectively be a body camera on a rifle with raising the level of accountability there. The fact that this could then go commercial and be used in police and SWAT and big game hunting, for that matter. These folks have a lot of money. So, I mean, I think that, as these things get introduced and tweaked and you get more eyes on it, the product that Byron works on with BATDOK is a vital sensor. Started out the contract was for Navy pilots to measure their performance under duress. And now it is military medical for transport care. And so, you can get a lot of collaboration. That's one of the great things that we enjoy when working in these military medical contracts, because we're not just, it's always at the forefront of technology. We're not building, the 14th version of an electric toothbrush for somebody so that they can reduce the cost of goods sold by 10 cents and build them cheaper. We'll do that too. I mean, that's has some fun and it does pay the rent. But when we work with folks in the military, especially military medical, they're always at the forefront of technology. They care deeply about what they do, and that's really one of the reasons why Brett came to us about putting this event together, and people just popped up out of the woodwork. Not that people live in the woodwork, but they just popped out of the woodwork to say, yeah, we're interested in that. Yeah, we do a little bit of that. I've never met Larissa. We're 20 miles apart. So we've got to spend more time in these kinds of sessions, collaborating, getting together, figuring out what we each do. We've been 22 years in this city. I don't consider anyone here I don't consider any of my competition threat. I consider them opportunity. And so that's why we have our competition here. IQ has been our competition, but at the same time, we've worked together in many, many programs. We always find a way to work together. So in closing, the biggest thing is let's keep the conversation going. Let's have more opportunity for collaboration, more opportunity for sharing information. Brett will be reaching out to you to get your comments on the event. Please give him 5 stars because his job depends on it. It really doesn't. But please let's just keep the conversation going. We're going to be having other events within the Pittsburgh area talking about some of the other things that we do. We're already planning a low power hardware software design event run by our hardware team because they didn't get to participate in any of this fun. So thank you. Brett, do you have any closing administrative things?
Yeah. Come on up. You can get your parking down.
Yep. Speaker's on. We bought you lunch. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Alec.
Yeah.